What's up, everybody? I wanted to pop in for a quick reaction to something I thought was kind of interesting, and I wanted to just make this like a live reaction really quick to check this out. Something I came across this video from the YouTuber The Explainer Comics, and it's uh every woke comic hated by fans. I'm going to do part 1 and 2 of this. So don't get your undies in a bunch about this, but one, because you cannot deny there's been some quote unquote radical changes in comics in the past decade at this point. But let's go over this, and I give my overall thoughts. I might stop here and there to give my overall thoughts, but let's get right into it. Check out his videos and leave a comment below. Let me know what you guys think overall.
New Warriors. This comic never even made it to shelves, and still became one of the most hated books in Marvel history. In March 2020, Marvel dropped a trailer for a New Warriors reboot introducing 5 new characters. Within hours, the internet exploded. Trailblazer, B-Negative, Screen Time, and front and center, Snowflake and Safe Space. It read like a parody, but this was Marvel's actual lineup. Fully serious, fully official. The backlash hit instantly. YouTube downvotes piled up, Reddit threads blew up.
I remember this. This was so dumb. This is when I think when I heard about those things, I think this is around the time when I kind of started taking notice of these kind of woke crap. And I know some people are like, y'all miss or overusing the word woke. It wasn't intended. Yeah, I know it wasn't intended to be a negative, but it is now because certain people kept forcing it, and it ends up turning into something negative because it's like you're adding stuff into things that isn't needed, or you're trying to push something or tell people you should like this instead of just making it organic. You just got like Safe Space, Snowflake. It's like, oh my God. It's just, all in all, you kind of overdid it just to be real. It seems like eye-rolly. You gotta admit, it gets kind of eye-rolly when you're trying to look. Put it this way: if you're telling like a movie about, let's go with a movie about pirates, and in general, it's a movie about pirates where you expect like fighting like the Spanish or the British, trying to pillage and still bury treasure, typical pirate stuff. But then if you somehow get a character who, let's be honest, will be considered a self-insert, talking about they don't identify as a he or she, that is woke. Because why in the world would something in the golden age of piracy be self-identifying anything? That is what people kind of mean when it just seems kind of out of place, out of nowhere, for no explicable reason, to add nothing to the overall story. That is woke. That is what people in general have like an ire with. Just to give you like a sense of what most of them coming from. Not every one of them are bigots. They raise legitimate concerns, especially when it comes to comics.
Comic YouTubers called it the death of Marvel's dignity. The video was so ratioed, Marvel disabled comments. The creators tried to explain the concept. Snowflake and Safe Space were meant to reclaim slurs and explore trauma, but fans weren't buying it. They called it virtue signaling nonsense wrapped in a cringe costume. But the book was never even released. After the trailer, Marvel went silent. No new previews, no digital listings. It was quietly canceled without explanation. A ghost book. The backlash kept growing as fans saw it less as a passion project and more like a boardroom brainstorm engineered to trend on Twitter. It wasn't just the names. It was how Marvel framed it as a woke team for modern youth without any actual stakes or substance. Even longtime fans of the original New Warriors felt insulted. America Chavez Solo Series. This series didn't just miss the mark, it set off a chain reaction of criticism that's still echoing today. When Marvel gave America Chavez her own solo run, expectations were high. She had breakout appeal from Young Avengers, was hyped as Marvel's first Latina LGBTQ+ hero, and had legit potential to lead a new wave. But the solo title that launched in 2017, that's where things unraveled. From the first issue, readers were confused. The art was inconsistent, but it was the writing that lit the match. America spoke almost entirely in hashtags, slang, and weirdly academic references. Some pages felt like a Tumblr feed, others read like a term paper. Plot points drifted, dialogue felt unnatural, and fans, even those excited for her, couldn't figure out who this version of America was supposed to be. Sales dipped fast. Issue 1 cracked the top 100, but by issue 5, it had fallen out of the top 300. Major YouTubers reviewed it with visible frustration, and the backlash spread across. It didn't help that writer Gabby Rivera was open about not being a comic reader before joining Marvel. Critics praised the bold voice. Fans said the story lacked direction and identity beyond identity itself. The series was canceled after just 12 issues. America Chavez would return in team books and eventually the MCU, but her solo run became a symbol of a bigger problem: how a great character can fall apart when the writing focuses more on slogans than substance. Ta-Nehisi Coates' Captain America.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. Because I think a lot of people probably got introduced to America Chavez by the time Doctor Strange 2 came out. And if the writers got nothing to, to like use as like a foundation except for a comic like that, of course it wasn't going to turn out to be good. If the comics suck, then why, what do the movie writers got to it? What do they have to adapt but trash stuff? And if it's trash comics, it's going to be a trash character in the film because they don't got no good foundation or good basis in the comics to use as a launching pad. Because as stated here, the writer and creator of America Chavez wasn't much of a comic reader. And if you need whoever's running these comic book companies need to fire, downgrade, or just plain old not hire people who doesn't have any type of passion behind writing comics. They're hiring people based off some kind of PR move. It's like, they're got the quote unquote fingers on the pulse of the Gen Zs or people who self-identify as this, that, and the third, and it's like, we're a comic book company. We're hiring good writers who have not only a history of being good writers, but also have read a substantial amount of comics in their day. Now, I read plenty of comics myself. I'm not saying that I know I haven't read every comic in the world that ever came out. Nobody has. But, I can, easily, well, honestly, I can easily write a comic, but I'm not going to go that far. But I'm not going to, if I was head of a company like Marvel, I'm not going to I can't in good conscience hire people who haven't had the mindset, or at least the history of reading a substantial amount of comics, because if they haven't, they walk it in blind, and it's gonna just be what they describe as like just talking in hashtags or whatever, and just be some kind of self-insert, or just being some kind of like prop for you know, a certain demographic to glom onto, and it's like you got no substance to it. So what would be the point? And I can see like there's something to America Chavez, not to the same degree as part like Miss Marvel, but even Kamala Khan had something beyond just being like a Pakistani girl. You know, it's just like they need more to that, the people to relate to, that people in general can relate to, not just people of that same demographic. I think a lot of people can relate to, for example, Captain America. I think any person from all walks of life can find something to relate with Captain America without them having to be a white straight guy. Same thing like with Black Panther. I think a lot of people can find something they can appreciate and respect about Black Panther they can identify with without being a black guy. But that's just goes to show you gotta have smart writers.
America and Black Panther. On paper, this should have been a slam dunk. Acclaimed writer, iconic characters, political depth. But once Coates took over Black Panther in 2016 and Captain America in 2018, something strange happened. The praise from critics soared, but the fan enthusiasm flatlined. The biggest complaint? The pacing. Both runs were heavy on monologue, light on momentum. Black Panther's Space Empire arc had sprawling philosophical debates about leadership, identity, and post-colonialism, but sometimes across 10 pages of talking. Captain America spent most of his time thinking deeply while punching less. Readers came in expecting bold action. They got lectures and inner conflict. At the same time, Coates' storytelling was respected. He brought literary weight and political edge. His Black Panther run was named one of the best comics of the year by multiple outlets. But in comic shops, fans dropped off hard after the first arc. Cap's sales dropped from 167K to under 25K by the second year. Some fans said the characters felt sidelined in their own books, like platforms for ideas, not personalities. The divide only deepened as Coates refused to pull punches, opening his Captain America run with a government overtaken by Hydra and a nation locked in ideological crisis. It wasn't subtle. Some praised it as bold. Others saw it as a one-note worldview stretched across too many issues. By the end, both series had strong hardcover sales, but monthly readers were gone. Coates left comics soon after, and fan forums still argue whether he elevated the medium or pushed it too far from its roots. Children of the Atom. Marvel billed it as the next generation of mutants, a teen squad with big X-Men energy. But when Children of the Atom finally launched in 2021, it landed like a thud. Delayed for over a year and dropping right in the middle of the Krakoa era, the book already felt out of sync. Then readers cracked it open, and the confusion really started. The story followed a group of teenagers obsessed with the X-Men, using tech to mimic their powers, a concept that immediately drew skepticism. But it was the dialogue that caused the real headache. Every character spoke like they were sponsored by TikTok. Non-stop slang, hashtags, and awkward Gen Z speak filled the pages. One panel read like it was written by someone who'd seen teenagers on a cereal box. Critics tried to spin it as youthful authenticity. Fans weren't having it. The main issue? None of the characters had real stakes. They weren't mutants. They didn't face the same struggles. They just cosplayed as X-Men, with gadgets that weren't fully explained. The tone bounced between cheesy school drama and vague superhero stuff with little payoff. Sales started modestly but dropped off quickly. Issue number 1 sold around 38,000 copies. By issue number 4, it was down to 15,000. The series ended after just 6 issues. She-Hulk 2022. Jennifer Walters has been many things: lawyer, Avenger, fourth wall breaker. But in 2022, Marvel gave her a soft reboot, and fans didn't recognize her anymore. The new She-Hulk series leaned hard into slice-of-life territory, dropping courtroom drama and superhero action in favor of romance plots, tea parties, and fashion panels. Critics applauded the tone shift, calling it charming and refreshing, but longtime...
Because, like, if you looked up, if you read She-Hulk back into like the 90s and 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, vastly different and more loved because she fully embraced, her government power form and like the being like a kind of eye candy for people, and she's like a great lawyer and stuff. It's just like, here they kind of lost their way a bit to, it's like this, you know, I don't know like what do they call it, those like teen drama type of like teen girl drama novel things that girls read. It's like that's what it felt like, and it's like, what is this? This is not She-Hulk at all. Sure, she hooks up with certain superpower people here and there, but it's just like you miss the point of it still being a comic book, and she gotta still fight bad guys. And you know, I don't know. It's just like if I'm gonna read like She-Hulk, I'd rather read the stuff between like the 80s all the way up to like the early 2000s.
Fans, they weren't impressed. The new run downplayed her intelligence and strength. One issue focused on her cleaning up the apartment and gossiping with Patsy Walker. Another centered on dating woes and cupcake baking. Readers started wondering if this was still the same character who once knocked out the Thing and argued cases before cosmic judges. Social media debates erupted. Supporters defended it as a fun character study. Detractors said Marvel reduced Jen into a quirky girlfriend role, stripped of her edge. And because the comic dropped right around the Disney Plus She-Hulk show, which had its own backlash for similar reasons, the confusion only got worse. Sales were decent at launch thanks to variant covers and media hype, but interest faded fast. Within a few issues, the title dropped out of the top 100. Reviews turned mixed, and comic shops reported little pull list retention. Writer Rainbow Rowell, known for Runaways, defended the creative direction as a reset, but the disconnect with core fans lingered. Instead of empowering or evolving She-Hulk, the 2022 run sidelined what made her iconic and left many readers flipping through the pages wondering when the superhero part was going to start. Ironheart. When Marvel introduced Riri Williams, they weren't just building a new hero, they were replacing one. Tony Stark was dead, and in his place stood a 15-year-old MIT genius in a suit of homemade armor. The debut came with major buzz, but the execution? That's where the turbulence started. Fans didn't reject Riri because she was young or black. The frustration came from how fast she was pushed to the front. No buildup, no deep arcs, no struggle. She built armor in her dorm, got Stark's blessing via AI hologram, and suddenly she was headlining as Ironheart. Many readers felt like they were told to care before they even had a chance to know who she was. The solo series launched in 2018, written by Eve Ewing, and had some solid opening numbers.
Yeah, that is like a big issue, and like I said, like with the other, like America Chavez, it's like it's around that time an all new, all different Marvel thing was trying to crop up. They're just like, I forgot what the word would be, but just like a stand-in, as like a prop to spout the message of care about black women, care about the LGBTQ, and it's like just tell you what you should like. None of it was organic at all, and yeah, Ironheart it's not a bad idea. Like with America Chavez, it's not a bad idea. Unlike Safe Space and Snowflake and all those crap, that was clearly crap. There was something to these characters. However, if there was no soul behind it, there's gotta be layers to these characters. It's kind of like Static Shock. Static Shock is like a vastly different, came across vastly different than Ironheart. You can tell from the show itself. I'm pretty sure a lot of people read like the comics back then too. But if you just want to go based off the show, he didn't there's moments every once in a while where he addressed serious things like gun violence or racial situations. But it came few and far in between, and they had weight to them because they earned that weight. Because at the end of the day, they're still superhero products. So they have to fight bad guys, stop crime, show off their superpowers, solve mysteries here and there. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Every once in a while, if you want to tackle something, you have to earn that spot. Ironheart did not earn that. America Chavez did not earn that. The writer seems like and the creators of these characters seem like they want to cut corners just to get to what they, think they should be talking about. It's just like, it gets very, eye rolly. It feels like you're being talking down to and condescending. That's what it feels like. And yeah, Ironheart is one of those people. Like I said, it's not a bad idea of a character, but you didn't start off on a good foot.
But the dialogue leaned heavy on exposition and moral lessons. The supporting cast was thin, and villains barely lasted 2 issues. While Riri was praised as a role model, critics and fans alike noted she lacked personality beyond being smart and defiant. Sales slipped quickly. Issue number 1 broke 40K in orders. By issue number 5, it was below 20K. The comic ended after 12 issues, and Riri was shuffled into team books like Champions, where she was often overshadowed by stronger characters like Miles Morales or Kamala Khan. I Am Not Starfire. This one didn't just spark criticism, it became an online punching bag. When DC announced I Am Not Starfire, a young adult graphic novel about Mandy, the rebellious goth daughter of the iconic Teen Titan, fans were immediately skeptical. She hated superheroes, rejected her mom's legacy, and spent most of the book sulking through high school drama. The title told you everything. She wasn't Starfire and didn't want to be. Written by Mariko Tamaki and illustrated by Yoshi Yoshitani, the book was framed as a coming-of-age story, but many readers saw it as something else, a self-insert rant wrapped in a cape. Mandy looked and talked like a version of the author, and Starfire, once a confident, powerful warrior, was now written like a clueless, bubbly embarrassment. The mother-daughter dynamic felt forced, and the superhero elements barely registered. Once preview pages dropped, the backlash was instant. YouTubers and Twitter threads torched it. The book was flooded with 1-star reviews on Goodreads and Amazon. Critics called it bold and emotionally raw. Fans called it condescending and anti-fan. DC stayed quiet. No strong marketing push followed. Sales were soft, and it didn't chart high on major lists. Some comic shops didn't even stock it. And when readers did get their hands on it, the takeaway was clear. This wasn't a love letter to the Titans. It was a rejection of everything they stood for. Marvel Voices and Pride. On launch, it sounded like a win, a series of one-shot anthologies spotlighting Marvel's diverse characters and creators. Titles like Marvel's Voices, Pride, Indigenous Voices, and Identity were meant to uplift underrepresented groups. But once the issues hit shelves, the celebration turned into criticism. Each issue featured a handful of mini-tales, 5 to 7 pages each, with limited plot and heavy-handed dialogue. Some were heartfelt tributes, others felt like checklists. Characters like Iceman, America Chavez, and Northstar showed up often, but didn't do much. The focus leaned more on making statements than building arcs. Reviewers praised the initiative. Readers started calling it diversity marketing in comic form. The Pride editions in particular drew backlash. Some fans accused Marvel of spotlighting queer characters just for visibility during June, with no follow-up across the year. Others pointed out how some characters featured, like Somnus, were introduced in one anthology.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another kick in the head. I'm shocked that people didn't pick up on. It's like, sure, you got a whole month for Pride and stuff to celebrate LGBTQ plus community, but it's like you're only gonna focus that 1 month on those particular characters who identify in that demographic. And after that, you kind of forget all about that stuff here and there. But it's just like, there's no follow through. There's no meaning. It's okay to have a person who identifies as a lesbian or whatever, like America Chavez, but you gotta give through the rest of the year. You gotta give them some kind of story that isn't centered around their skin color or gender identity or whatever. It's like Miles Morales ain't dealing with black issues every freaking adventure. Every once in a while, he has to just have a regular superhero adventure fighting the Rhino or Doc Ock or whomever. That is what will give the character a long-standing ground for future generations. I think if nothing's done properly, and Marvel and DC don't reconfigure or do some self-evaluation, characters like America Chavez will fall into obscurity. Probably will never be heard from again 5-10 years down the line.
And then never used again. Online, the divide was clear. Some hailed it as necessary representation. Others said it felt shallow, a product built to trend, not connect. And while the variant covers sold decently, many retailers reported that readers weren't adding the issues to their pull lists. Marvel continued the line annually, but rarely expanded these characters into solo titles or mainline teams. The intention was clear. The execution left fans divided. Marvel Voices wanted to be a celebration, but for many, it read more like a marketing memo. Representation matters, but readers wanted it wrapped in compelling, lasting stories. And that's where these books struggled to land. Iceman. For over 50 years, Bobby Drake was one of Marvel's original X-Men, a jokester, a hothead, and never short on confidence. But in 2015, Marvel took him in a completely new direction. During a conversation with teenage Jean Grey, adult Iceman was suddenly outed as gay. It wasn't a character arc, it wasn't foreshadowed. Jean read his mind and told him. That scene kicked off one of the most controversial retcons in X-Men history. Fans were stunned, not by the idea itself, but by how it happened. Bobby had a long history of relationships with women, and the change came without buildup. Critics praised it as progressive. Longtime readers questioned the logic. Was it character development or editorial decision? In 2017, Marvel gave Iceman a solo series written by Sina Grace. The book focused on Bobby exploring his identity, dating, and coming out to friends. But the stories leaned hard into awkward humor, preachy tone shifts, and panels that felt more like tweets than dialogue. The action took a back seat. Even among readers who supported the change, many said the writing felt disconnected from who Iceman used to be. Sales didn't hold. The series was canceled after 11 issues. A second volume launched later, but ran for just 5 more before ending again. Grace later wrote a Medium post claiming Marvel gave him no support and even blamed him when fans pushed back. He said he was left out of internal meetings and told not to engage negative reviews. Today, Iceman's legacy as a character is still intact, but the solo run is remembered more for its rollout than its impact. Faith. When Valiant launched Faith Herbert into her own solo series in 2016, it came with high hopes and heavy praise. A plus-size superhero who was smart, joyful, and geeky, comic outlets called her a refreshing new voice. The concept had promise, but the writing never rose to meet it. Faith was introduced as part of Valiant's Harbinger team, a fan favorite with real personality.
You ever sitting on top of telephone wires? You just like, are you trying to get more jokes? About this character? I don't even know this character. I don't read Valiant like that, but it's just like, honestly, you look at this image, how many jokes can you tell right off the top of your head? You could have just had this girl sitting on on the edge of a roof of a building or something at the very least.
But in her solo run, something changed. The action slowed, the villains turned goofy, and the scripts leaned heavily into blogger speak and media satire. One arc featured her fighting a reality TV villain, another centered around celebrity crushes and social media manipulation. It was less about being a superhero and more about quirky commentary. While critics applauded the body-positive messaging, fans started fading fast. Many praised the representation, but said the plots felt like filler. Faith was often written more.
Remember Bouncing Boy from the Legion of Superheroes? If you wanted a highlight, a plus size character, he has earned that spot more than anybody else because his powers ties in to his weight. And if you know anime, the character Fat Gum from My Hero Academia is a great represent. If you want somebody to represent people who are plus size, those two characters did more for people for plus size than anybody else because they had, part of the pun, more weight to them. This is just like he said. It's like this is just it's just meaningless. It's just like, here's a fat person. Love him. Why? Because you have to. Because it's just the right thing to do.
More like a brand ambassador than a hero. Dialogue focused on positivity over stakes. Real threats were rare, and readers who wanted her to be more than a symbol got stuck in stories that barely moved. The series ran through multiple relaunches and mini-arcs, but it never expanded into the bigger Valiant universe like it was supposed to. Sales were modest early on, but they never grew. Despite variant covers and promotional pushes, Faith never became the anchor character the company hoped for. By 2018, Faith's spotlight had dimmed. Her last solo arc faded out without buzz. No major crossovers, no resurrection and Valiant's relaunches. She wasn't just underused, she was shelved. The pitch was strong, the message was solid, but when it came to writing stories that could stand beside the industry's best, Faith didn't have the weight to hold her place. Undeniably, comics keep changing.
Okay, let's go to
Son of Kal-El. DC was looking to shake things up. In 2021, they handed the Superman mantle to Jon Kent, Clark's teenage son, and made headlines almost instantly. Before readers even cracked open issue number 1, the news cycle was buzzing. Jon Kent would be revealed as bisexual. Mainstream outlets ran it everywhere, and the
I
books...
remember this. Oh my, it was such a terrible promotion, because if you look back on it, the DC made this kind of like promotion material, or at least some kind of statement or something like that. They got the word out, for like news outlets, like Superman is bisexual, because they trying to get more readers. They're trying to weasel people into reading the comic to see if Superman, because when you hear Superman, you only think of Clark Kent. They didn't use the name Clark Kent. They didn't use the name Jon Kent. They just used Superman. And they knew that people would automatically think of Clark Kent. And all of a sudden he's bisexual now. And because you raised baited people into reading it, because you knew no one's going to care if Jon Kent, Clark's son, is bisexual, because nobody's really going to probably read Jon Kent comics like that. So, and that's another thing. You already forced him, to age him up and stuff, because you didn't find it easy to make a story about a young Jon Kent story, which I still don't think. I still think you dropped the ball on that, because you plenty of stories you can do with a young Jon Kent Superboy story, and then take the time to have him grow up. But you rushed it, so now you're, slap, like you did with Tim Drake, just slap a label on him, because you didn't feel like you got all these great writers like Tom King, and you couldn't find nobody to have like a solid story to tell with this character. So that way you trying to, it's kind of like, the term fridging, where you're just kind of forcing a narrative by killing off somebody close to the main character, just to force a story, a driving, force for the main character. You're kind of doing that in a way with slapping a particular label on a character, because you got no other story that you can think of. And this is kind of a quick way to like, oh, he's gay, let his adventure, or at least his arc, having to deal with that, instead of just giving like a villain to deal with and some kind of trouble he got to overcome in an arc. It's not that hard, honestly. You just didn't want to spend the mental energy into doing so. It's lazy writing, and you trick people too, and that gets under my skin when people like to trick readers into buying comic books. I get you want people to make sure that people buy your comic books, but if you are competent as a writer, then word of mouth will get around. But you're trying to cut corners.
First issues got a sales boost from the attention, but after that initial splash, things fell apart fast. Readers jumped in expecting thrilling superhero adventures, and what they found was Jon attending climate protests and arguing about social activism. Fan criticism piled up quickly, not because Jon was bisexual, but because the writing felt flat and the storytelling thin.
And of course, there's those certain critics want to like with the movies and TV shows as of late, like, oh, you're an ist or a phobe because you call him out. It's like, you don't give a god dang about his sexuality. What you doing beyond that? You're making it the focus, and that's the only focus. It ain't us that you're blaming us for calling it out because you're putting it out there. It's kind of weird.
John spent more time giving lectures than punching villains, and longtime Superman fans felt like they were watching the world's strongest superhero get bogged down in mundane politics. By issue 3, sales were sliding, and by the end of its run in late 2022, the series was essentially limping to cancellation. The plots never clicked with fans, and no real villains or memorable arcs ever emerged. Even the action scenes felt sparse and underwhelming. Strangely, critics praised it throughout, calling it brave and important. But on the shelves, readers disappeared fast. The result was a run that DC seemed eager to quietly shelve, moving John Kent out of the spotlight soon after. And just to twist the knife, John Kent's short-lived time as Superman ended up overshadowed by Clark Kent's return, the original Superman taking his title right back. The experiment didn't last long. John still shows up in DC stories today, but his big moment as the Superman became one of the...
They gave that to the newest guy who's playing Superman right now, Corn Sweat. You saw the first trailer, and him as Clark Kent persona, he had that broccoli hairstyle. I don't know why is that the hip new style for young guys these days, because it looks stupid. It does. I don't know why it is. Maybe that's what people thought about the mullet, but I don't know. The mullet looks more respectable, and I don't know. It's just that the broccoli hair makes no sense. At least with the mullet, you have the catchphrase of whole, business in the front, party in the back. What's with the broccoli hairstyle? I'm a vegan?
Most short-lived torch passings in comic history. The United States of Captain America. This comic was supposed to be a celebration. Marvel put Steve Rogers back on the road, traveling across America to reconnect with the country, but this time, he wasn't alone. The hook? Along the way, Steve would meet a lineup of local Captain Americas, ordinary people who represented communities from every corner of the country. Sounds like a creative way to honor Cap's legacy, at least on paper, but readers didn't exactly salute. From the very first issue, fan backlash was loud. The writing came under fire for feeling clunky, stuffed with awkward dialogue, and paper-thin characters who seemed written as walking symbols rather than believable people. The most talked-about addition being Aaron Fisher, a young, gay, homeless activist who wore a makeshift Captain America suit while protecting runaways. Fisher's introduction grabbed headlines in mainstream media. Marvel even previewed him before the series launched, but many longtime readers felt like the comic didn't do the concept justice. Instead of exploring complex, grounded stories, readers found scenes that felt like lecture notes with speech bubbles. Critics praised it as timely and inclusive, but the conversations online told a different story, readers saying it felt like Marvel was more interested in showing off a checklist than writing a compelling Cap story. The art didn't help either. Stiff panels and generic backgrounds made each stop on Cap's journey blur together. Even Steve Rogers himself felt sidelined, with issues shifting focus so quickly between new characters that nothing stuck. By the time the final issue rolled out, the series had fizzled. No lasting characters, no memorable villains, no powerful legacy moments, just another short-lived run.
Yeah, this is one of my earliest comic book reviews, because, I had a hard time because I wanted to review a Captain America comic, and I didn't have that much of a good time trying to find like a solid Captain America story. And this one seemed interesting because like, a love letter to Captain America, because it isn't just Bucky or Sam Wilson that took out the mantle. There was other people who took out the mantle of Captain America. I think it was celebrating 80 years at that time. I didn't hate the comic, but I get what he was talking about, because I remember at the tail end, it's just like Captain America allowing all these different other Captain Americas, and I'm glad they even included U.S. Agent, because he's still technically a Captain America. All these different representations of, or at least people who took up the mantle, and give this kind of like a little. He felt sidelined to give them like a voice and all this other stuff, and it's supposed to be Steve Rogers as the headliner, and he's kind of like making room for these other characters. So to hope, because I think they kind of expect some kind of spin-off between any one of these characters. Haven't heard anything from them outside of Bucky, Steve, Sam, and John Walker, because they're the primary ones people will remember. These others, especially the person who's gay, homeless guy, they are never going to be heard from again. I don't even think they ever even attempted a comic centered around any one of these people.
That Marvel quietly left behind. New X-Men, Hellfire Gala. This one was pitched as a bold crossover event where mutants would host a high-fashion, high-society gala on the mutant island of Krakoa. Red carpets, celebrity cameos, couture costumes, and apparently superhero drama somewhere in the background. At least that's what the promo promised. The gala ran across multiple titles, dragging the X-Men into a narrative that felt more like a Vogue photo shoot than a mutant.
It's kind of like the whole Met Gala thing, but for Marvel, and it was fun at first when they first did it, when the Krakoa era kind of started off, but they kept doing it all the time, and it did feel like some kind of weird photo shoot with quirky costumes, not unlike the whole Met Gala thing. And it's how I felt about the Met Gala stuff. It's like what are we doing here? It's like, you're not ever going to wear something like this in real life. Yeah, it's just like, I don't hate it, but it's just never my thing, and I do skip it.
Saga. For longtime fans, it was jarring. Issue after issue showed beloved characters striking poses, sipping drinks, and walking runways while readers waited for stakes, tension, or conflict to actually appear. Fans quickly noticed the event was heavy on aesthetics, light on plot. The designs by Russell Dauterman were elaborate and stylish, earning praise from art critics and fashion blogs, but readers felt stranded. The actual storylines felt disjointed, full of awkward small talk, weird cameos, and almost no forward momentum for the Krakoa saga. Even the big twist, the revelation of a new X-Men lineup voted in by mutants worldwide, didn't land with much excitement. The vote itself was announced long before in a public Marvel poll, so readers already knew the outcome before turning the page. Across Marvel's line, issues labeled as part of the Hellfire Gala often read like filler. Minimal action, no real threats, just characters showing off their designer looks. Critics loved the spectacle. Fans felt disconnected, wondering why their favorite X-Men books had suddenly become fashion catalogs. By the time the event wrapped, it left barely a ripple in X-Men continuity. The next arcs moved on fast, and the Hellfire Gala quietly faded into a curious Marvel experiment, beautifully illustrated but narratively empty. Crush and Lobo. The comic was DC's attempt to give a rising anti-hero her own spotlight, and to cash in on the chaos that comes with putting the daughter of Lobo, the main man himself, center stage. On paper, this sounded wild. Crush, half-Xarnian rebel with attitude, decides she's had enough of her absentee, psychotic dad and plans a face-to-face showdown at an intergalactic prison. Perfect setup for space fights, trash talk, and mayhem. Instead, what readers got felt weirdly hollow. The series kicked off with Crush breaking up with her girlfriend and spiraled into page after page of emotional unpacking and quirky jokes that didn't land. Fans jumped into this expecting brutal action and crazy adventures. They got therapy sessions and zany quips. The artwork by Amancay Nahuelpan had style and energy, but the writing leaned hard into self-aware humor and awkward banter, often sidelining the plot. The dynamic between Crush and Lobo, which should have been sharp, sarcastic, and explosive, rarely took off. Lobo himself barely felt like the unhinged space biker fans remembered. By the time the Prison Break storyline actually kicked into gear, most readers had already checked out. Sales dropped issue to issue, and by the end of its 8-issue run, Crush and Lobo had vanished from conversation. No tie-ins, no major fallout in the DC universe, no lasting impact. It simply existed and then didn't. Harley Quinn, The Eat, Bang, Kill, Tour. After the success of the Harley Quinn animated series, DC went all in with a spin-off comic designed to capture the same chaotic energy. The Eat, Bang, Kill tour picked up right where Season 2 left off. Harley and Poison Ivy running away together after wrecking Ivy's wedding. It promised wild road trip fun, romance, and plenty of violence. At least, that's what fans were hoping for. Right from the start, the comic focused on Harley and Ivy's playful road trip, full of jokes and minor misadventures, with no real danger driving the story. And while that sounded fine in theory, readers expecting the clever, dark humor and sharp writing from the animated series didn't find it here. Instead, the dialogue felt shallow, and the jokes didn't land with the same bite. The series leaned heavily into Harley's over-the-top antics, but forgot to give her anything interesting to do. Page after page went by where nothing substantial happened, with much of the plot centered around Harley and Ivy exchanging playful quips while dodging minor inconveniences. The art by Max Sarin brought a cartoonish, bubbly style that matched the tone, but didn't resonate with all fans, especially those used to the more dynamic look of the show. Reviews praised its LGBTQ+ representation, but also noted that the comic lacked narrative drive. Even Harley's usual madness felt dialed down. By the end of its short 6-issue run, the Eat, Bang, Kill tour wrapped up without much fanfare. It never built enough momentum to become essential reading, and most fans quickly moved back to waiting for the next season of the animated show, where Harley and Ivy's story had far more spark. Batwoman Rebirth. By 2021, DC was determined to make Batwoman a headline hero again. Kate Kane had been introduced years earlier as Bruce Wayne's cousin, an LGBTQ+ icon, and a military-trained vigilante with a grim edge. The Rebirth relaunch was supposed to bring her back to prominence, modernized for a new audience, and reflecting progressive themes more overtly. But from the opening issues, the relaunch struggled. The creative team leaned heavily into Kate's identity and trauma, making it the core of nearly every plotline, but the execution felt heavy-handed. Story arcs were bogged down in melodrama and exposition, and longtime fans quickly pointed out that Batwoman felt more like a symbol on the page than a fully fleshed-out character.
Thank you for letting me know, because I've been a while ago, I was thinking about doing a Batwoman comic review, and I thought, because by and large, if you want to get started on reading some, get started on some DC comics, typically I recommend DC Rebirth because it's like a nice, point. But I ain't going to be doing that with Batwoman if this is the case. I'm going to probably find something much earlier to read if I want to do some, Batwoman reading.
The villains didn't help either. Instead of facing Gotham's elite rogues gallery or meaningful new antagonists, Batwoman was paired with uninspired, one-note adversaries that lacked menace or intrigue. Many issues revolved around inner turmoil and personal struggles that never escalated into compelling action or mystery. The art, while occasionally stylish, also failed to capture the noir vibe that made Batwoman's earlier runs feel atmospheric and distinct. Panels felt static, and fight scenes lacked impact. Sales reflected the lack of enthusiasm. The book quietly lost readers month after month, slipping from DC's must-read list and eventually closing shop without leaving much of a mark on Gotham's ever-expanding mythology. Marvel's Voices Infinity comic Snowguard. This one was created to spotlight diverse characters and creators, and in 2023, they gave Snowguard her own entry. Amka Aliak, an Inuit teen hero from Canada, first appeared in Champions back in 2018 and stood out immediately as one of Marvel's few Indigenous heroes. But when her solo comic finally arrived as part of the Voices Infinity digital series, reader reactions weren't exactly enthusiastic. Snowguard's story was meant to celebrate her cultural roots, but what fans got felt flat and oddly generic. The writing lacked energy, and dialogue was filled with exposition-heavy monologues that slowed every scene. Instead of dynamic superhero action or meaningful conflict, much of the issue played out like a travelogue, heavy on cultural explanation and light on character development. Even longtime Champions readers noticed Snowguard's vibrant, defiant personality seemed dulled. She felt more like a tour guide than a superhero, walking readers through issues of colonialism and representation in a way that felt more like a lecture than an adventure. The art didn't leave much of an impression either. Panels were minimalistic, partly due to the digital-first format, but they lacked the visual flair that might have brought Amka's powers and world to life. While critics praised Marvel for spotlighting Indigenous representation, comments from readers reflected a different vibe entirely. Most felt like the comic wasn't really written for them, or for anyone looking for a fun, exciting superhero tale. Batgirl of Burnside. When DC revamped Batgirl in the 2010s leading into the 2020s, they gave Barbara Gordon a total makeover. Not just in costume, but in tone, setting, and attitude. This was Batgirl of Burnside, a version of Babs recast as a 20-something living in a trendy, Brooklyn-style neighborhood, dealing with roommates, social media, coffee shops, and gentrification. The goal was clear: attract a younger, millennial audience by making Batgirl relatable, fresh, and quirky. but longtime fans weren't buying it. The writing leaned
like
heavily
that one.
into millennial cliches, with Barbara checking Instagram feeds between punching criminals and using emoji speak in her dialogue. Readers criticized the series for turning Batgirl into a hipster caricature, complete with awkward hashtags and relatable blog posts. Storylines revolved around influencer culture and tech startups, rather than Gotham's gritty crime underworld. For a character once known for sharp intelligence and detective skills, this run felt like a complete shift in personality, one that many fans felt didn't respect her legacy. The artwork followed suit: bright, poppy colors, flat backgrounds, and a fashion-forward aesthetic that gave Burnside a bubblegum feel, far removed from the shadowy alleys of Gotham City. While critics praised it for trying something different and progressive, many longtime readers felt disconnected from this new version of Barbara Gordon. Sales initially jumped due to curiosity and a strong marketing push, but they didn't hold. Burnside's Batgirl quietly receded from prominence as DC shifted focus elsewhere, and by the time Barbara returned to the main Bat family books, the hipster phase was largely ignored. Captain Marvel by Kelly Thompson. When Kelly Thompson took over Captain Marvel in 2019, Carol Danvers was already polarizing. The MCU had just pushed her front and center, and Marvel was determined to make her one of the publisher's flagship characters. Thompson's run lasted over 40 issues, a rare feat for a modern solo Marvel title, but despite its longevity, the fan base stayed divided. From the outset, the writing leaned into portraying Carol as near invincible and uncompromising, but that characterization quickly drew criticism. Many readers felt Carol came across as too perfect, always winning, always right, and rarely showing vulnerability. The villains didn't help. Throughout the run, Carol was paired with forgettable antagonists who never felt like serious threats, leading to stories that lacked tension or stakes. Fans who stuck with the series noticed a pattern: slow plots, predictable conflicts, and frequent dialogue heavy on affirmations and pep talks, but light on memorable moments. Even major arcs like The Last Avenger, where Carol fought other heroes, felt mechanical. The art fluctuated from arc to arc, with a rotating roster of artists giving the book an inconsistent look. While individual covers often stood out, the interior art rarely elevated the material. Despite these issues, Marvel kept pushing Carol in the spotlight: crossovers, variant covers, and endless marketing. The disconnect was obvious. Sales numbers trended downward even as Marvel doubled down on her status as a premier character. By 2022, the run wrapped up quietly. Carol Danvers was still prominent in Marvel's larger universe, but her solo book struggled to keep readers engaged throughout its entire run. The legacy of Thompson's tenure? A title that lasted longer than expected but rarely sparked excitement. A marathon of mediocrity that didn't quite deliver the defining Captain Marvel era Marvel was hoping for. Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan later solo runs, 2000s. When Kamala Khan debuted in 2014, she became an instant success. The early Ms. Marvel issues were widely praised for their heart, humor, and relatability, blending superhero action with an authentic coming-of-age story set in Jersey City. But as the 2000s rolled around, things changed. By the time her later solo runs arrived, reader enthusiasm had cooled. Kamala's newer books felt stale. The same high school struggles and cultural identity beats kept repeating, but without the spark that made them feel fresh the first time. Plots grew thin, often revolving around minor villains and low-stakes conflicts, while Kamala herself seemed stuck in a holding pattern. Fan criticism wasn't just about repetition, it was about a shift in tone. Dialogue became clunky, with heavy-handed messaging overtaking character-driven moments, the charm of Kamala's. Earlier adventures faded as later issues read more like they were written to fulfill a checklist than to tell exciting superhero stories. The art varied wildly across
That's the biggest
art.
problem. All these things are just checklists. None of these things had that, if at all, any heart at all. Aside from maybe Kamala Khan, when she first started out, I enjoyed it. Matter of fact, I reviewed Kamala Khan's debut comic in one of my, comic book reviews of her. But after that run was finished, as the years progressed, she just become, just dull. Because kept repeating the same beats. And the TV show did not help. And then putting her into the mutant box when she's an inhuman. Now she's like an inhuman mutant hybrid, which is like you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. It's so annoying. I really like this character and actually had potential. Well, she has potential, but they kept futzing with her. Oh God, it's
with
such
some issues
disappointment.
offering vibrant panels and others looking rushed and flat. Even as Marvel pushed Kamala into team books, crossovers, and prepped her MCU launch, her solo runs kept losing steam. Sales reflected that fatigue. New #1 issues launched but quickly dropped in the charts, often ending after short runs. Fans who loved Kamala in her early appearances increasingly voiced that the character deserved better material than what her later books delivered. By the time her MCU debut was nearing, Kamala's comic adventures had lost much of their buzz. So with all these comics that tried to redefine beloved heroes but lost their audience fast, do you think these bold reinventions will ever find a way to actually...
Yeah, this is terrible. I'm gonna check like the comments. Like, what did they say? Don't forget that Jonathan Boyfriends was like the author's self-insert. All the failed stories have two things in common: LGBTQ and inclusive. The moral of the story is that if the critics hate it, it's probably good, and if the critics love it, it's probably garbage. Probably makes sense there. In a literal sense, I never realized how gay comics got. I honestly miss the days when Harley and Ivy's relationship was purely platonic. Yeah, I miss those days too, honestly. I got another one. The current Tim Drake comics suddenly revealed he's bisexual and in a relationship with his best friend. It's out of nowhere. No build up, no indication. They were anything but good buddies after all these years. Yeah, that's like... That was terrible. People, to this day, are so bothered by what they did to Tim Drake. A lot of people love Tim Drake. And the fact that the writers could not figure out some proper story to tell. They thought like, let's make him bisexual. Now we got some kind of built-in excuse for a story because you're too lazy to actually take the time to come up with a story organically. And these creators are not actual fans. They are just handed these diverse books and then they clap like seals. Yep. One last one. What truly is wasted about John Kent's debut is that Jay is a terrorist. John abandons the morals that make Superman heroic for the sake of someone who is actively manipulating him. Jay should have been turned into a villain and caused John to search for the real truth and overcome being a mouthpiece. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that is... Oh my God, this is, comics nowadays. In the past handful of years, I had to be a lot more mindful about what I'm choosing to read. I don't like what they did with Loki right now because Loki's a man. But ever since the TV show, they're starting to make him some androgynous person. Hey, is there another one here? Oh, this is a Revoked show. I'll probably check this out on a different another day. But let me know in the comments what you think. Definitely check out the Expander Comics videos. I want to check out a lot more stuff of his. But I'll see you guys in a bit. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you guys think about current comics in the recent years. And I will see you guys later. Peace.